Hi, this is Professor Unmacked, and I've put together this short video to talk to you a little bit about the three parts of political parties and how they interact with one another to make our voting choices as voters more meaningful in the policymaking process. This is one of my favorite quotes about political parties. If I could not go to heaven but with a party, I would not go there at all. So said Thomas Jefferson shortly before he and James Madison formed a political party. We've always had kind of a love-hate relationship with political parties, but it turns out that democracies function better if there are political parties helping to structure the voters' choices for elected officials. And there actually aren't any true democracies or Republican forms of government in the world that don't have political parties. So there are three parts of political parties, and I'm going to talk about each of them briefly. The first is the party organization, and this is the part of the party that actually does the work of the party. So it includes a party chair who coordinates the party's fundraising activities and promotes the party in the media and organizes the staff, the people who work for the party. There's the party in government, which is elected officials who get elected under the party's label. And then there's the party in the electorate, which is made up of voters. And these three different parts of political parties interact in some pretty meaningful ways. So I'm going to describe each of the political party parts of the political parties. So the first are the party organizations. Let me show you everything that's on this screen. So the party organizations are the people. The party as an organization is an actual organization, like a business would be a business. And there are people who run that organization, and they have some pretty specific functions. So each political party has a national party organization and also state and local party organizations within each of the states. And the national party organizations tend to focus on national things like the presidency and the US Congress, and state party organizations focus on state level elections, like elections for governor and elections for, in California, the California State Assembly and the California State Senate. And of course, at the local level, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party at the local level tend to focus on county or regional issues. So there's a Sacramento County Democratic Party and a Sacramento County Republican Party. These are the two chairs of the national political parties. This is Ronna McDaniel. She's the chair of the Republican Party at the national level. And this is Tom Perez. He's the chair of the Democratic Party at the national level. And you'll see them sometimes on the media talking about the political party and the way the party as an organization is trying to help influence elections and to get people to vote for the party, etc. So the party organizations do a bunch of specific things. One of the things that they do that's most important is that they adopt a platform. So before each presidential election at the national level, the two main parties, and all the minor parties too, but I don't mean to pretend that we don't have a multi-party system, but we only have two major parties. So I'm going to talk about the Democrats and the Republicans as if the other parties don't exist. So what the parties do is they adopt a platform. And what the platform is, it's a document that outlines all of the parties' political stances on issues that they think are important to voters. So for example, the Democratic Party has a section or a plank in its party that is pro-choice on the issue of abortion. And the Republican Party has a plank in its party platform that is pro-life or opposed to abortion. And they take positions on any issues that they think will appeal to voters: civil rights, civil liberties, the environment, taxes, business, regulations, etc. And the platforms have that information in them. They also raise money. They raise a lot of money. And they use that money to promote the party, not only as an organization, so they use that money to pay their rent on buildings and to pay their staff and to travel and all of that. But they also raise money that they then use to try to help people from their party get elected to office. This is a website called opensecrets.org. It's one of the best websites available on money in politics. And one of the things that you can see from this chart is just how much collectively the Democratic Party, their different arm fundraising arms of the Democratic and Republican parties raised and spent in the 2018 election cycle, keeping in mind that there was no president on the ballot in 2018. So this is money that was raised and spent for the House of Representatives, for the Senate, for governors' races, for state legislative offices, etc. The Democratic and Republican parties don't actually run the campaigns of people running for office, but they can help those candidates by raising money and then using that money in various ways to help the people who are running for office. They help party candidates get elected in a bunch of different ways. They can use some of their money to do voter registration drives. They can do what we call get out the vote efforts, which might be contacting voters, reminding people that there's an election, calling people on election day and encouraging them to get out and vote. Parties aren't the only entities that do this. Interest groups do this. The candidates themselves do this. Religious organizations do this, etc. But parties play a role in that. They also do a lot of advertising on behalf of the party and the candidates who are running for office. There are some rules and regulations at the federal and state level that sort of regulate how some of the money that the parties raise and spend can be used, but for the most part, the parties are able to try to influence voters through advertising. They also give a lot of money to candidates running for office. Again, this is somewhat regulated at the federal level for candidates running for the House and Senate and presidency. And it's also regulated at the state level. California, for example, has its own law that regulates how much money candidates can get from any one entity, from any individual, or from any interest group, or from any political party. So they can give money to candidates directly. They can also use their money to try to help the candidates in other ways by advertising on behalf of the party, by trying to get people to vote and that kind of thing. The party in government consists of anybody who gets elected under the party's label at every level of government. So, for example, President Trump is part of the Republican Party in government at the national level, and Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, is part of the California Democratic Party in government. So we're talking about people who serve in state legislatures and who serve in governorships, and also people who are in the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House. Most of those offices are elected under party labels. You run as a Democrat or you run as a Republican, and then once in office, the parties play a role in organizing the power structure of those offices. So, for example, right now, it is the Republican Party that controls the United States Senate. And so all of the leaders, the chairs of all the committees in the Senate, are Republicans. And in the House of Representatives, it's just the opposite. The Democratic Party controls all of the committees and all of the major leadership positions within the House of Representatives. So, for example, the Speaker of the House is a Democrat, Nancy Pelosi. The party in the electorate is voters. Anybody who identifies with one of the political parties is part of the party in the electorate. So if you vote, if you're a Democrat, you're part of the Democratic Party in the electorate. If you're a Republican, you're part of the Republican Party in the electorate. And even if you consider yourself independent, if you usually vote Democratic, you're still pretty much part of the Democratic Party in the electorate, and same thing on the Republican side. The party in the electorate has plays a role not only in electing candidates for office, but also nominating candidates for office. And that's done primarily through what we call primaries and caucuses, which are described in your textbook. But that process is actually already gearing up for the 2020 election. There are already over a dozen people who have announced that they want to that they will be competing for the Democratic Party nomination for president. So that process is actually already starting to play out. The first primaries will be held in 2020 in the early states like New Hampshire, and then in Iowa that hold what are called caucuses. And so the candidates are spending a lot of time campaigning already and making speeches and meeting voters, et cetera, in those states. But the nomination process happens for all partisan offices, for governors, for state legislatures, for the House of Representatives, for the Senate. So anybody who's up for reelection, any office that's up for reelection, that is an office that gets elected through the party process, they'll be gearing up to do all of this in 2020. And it's the party voters, not the party organizations, who choose the candidates who get to run under the party's label. There are significant differences between the Democrats and Republicans if you read their platforms, but this is kind of a cool graph that seems to suggest that the party in the electorate is getting more polarized over time. And this is reflected in the way in the candidates who get elected. So as the party in the electorate gets more liberal or more conservative, depending on which party you're talking about, the people they elect will also get more liberal or more conservative. And that can make it more difficult for policy making, right? I wanted to show you this graphic. So you can see over time where the median Democrat or the sort of middle Democrat has gotten more liberal and the median Republican has gotten somewhat more conservative over time. And what that means is that these voters will vote for more liberal Democrats and the Republicans will choose more conservative Republicans. And that can make it more difficult for people once they get into office to cooperate with one another. And so you do get a lot more gridlock and a lot more partisan battles in Congress, and we've seen that over time. So the last slide that I want to show you is one that you can look at. I'll post this PowerPoint as well, is the different ways that the parties interact with one another. So, for example, the party as an organization interacts with the party in the electorate by doing get out the vote drives, encouraging people to vote, providing them voters with a platform that they can use to evaluate candidates. The party in the electorate chooses the party in government and can hold them accountable in the next election if the party in government doesn't do the things that the party in the electorate wants them to do. The party in government gets a lot of money from the party organization. They also get to use that label as a way of appealing to voters. And then in turn, they're expected to promote the party's platform and to try to get done what the party platform says they should get done, whether it's protecting the environment on the Democratic side or cutting taxes or cutting government regulation on business on the Republican Party side. So political parties, we don't tend to love them all that much if you ask people how they feel about parties, but they do play an important part of organizing elections and helping make our choice as voters simpler, because that party label stands for positions on issues that voters care about. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this. I'm not all that great at these little videos, but I do my best.